Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Juliet. So in this video I will be showing you how to make this trendy Bubu gown. So here is my Ankara fabric. We are going to be measuring the length at this edge of the fabric. This is the factory edge. So we're going to be measuring the length of our dress that way. So after which I'm folding it into two here, right sides together. So here is one for the front and then another for the back, both folded into two, and I place the two of them on top of each other. So next up I am marking the point where the butterfly is going to stop, which I use 32 inches for the measurement I'm working with. You may have to measure yourself to know where you want it to stop, somewhere around the hip line or below the hip line. So here I'm marking 3 inches inwards, and then on this open end I'm going to mark 1 inch downwards and slant that as the shoulder slope. So if you're not using Ankara fabric, you may want to use your shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus your sleeve length and seam allowance to get that fold. Because I'm working with this fabric, I'm using exactly what I have there, which is 23 inches all in all. So for the neckline, I'm marking 5 inches wide and then 5 inches deep, and I'm curving it out. I'm going to be using the same neckline for both the front and the back. So next up I am adjusting my fabric. I'm going to be marking the length of the dress right now. So remember, this line was 32 inches, so I'm going to place 32 inches on that line and go ahead to mark the full length of my dress plus 1.5 inch of sewing allowance. So placing 32 inches on that line and marking the rest of my length. So using my ruler, I'm connecting the points together, and I will use my scissors to cut that out. So next, from this hip line, I'm going to be marking the hip measurement I'm working with divided by 4 plus 1 inch of ease. So I'm going to be marking that from that line all the way to the hem of the dress. I'm going to be using my ruler to connect the points together, and then I will go ahead to mark 2 extra inches for sewing allowance. So next up, from this point we are going to be making a curve all the way to this down. So we're going to curve this way to meet the upper line, but this line here is not where the curve should be. That is the line we're going to be sewing on. So the curve will start from the seam allowance line, which I'm going to adjust in a minute. So this is where we're going to be cutting. That is where the curve should be. Ignore the first curve I made. That was a mistake. So next I'll be cutting. I'll start from the shoulder. I'm going to be cutting the shoulder slant. And then I will be cutting the neckline. You have the option of making your back neckline higher than the front. And then I'll be cutting the curve like so. Following the outer line, which is the seam allowance line. And then all the way to the hem of the dress. So this dress is going to have opening by the sides, which is why it's this fitted. So you have the option of having the opening at the back as well, but for this video it's going to be by the sides. So here's a piece of fabric. I folded it into two. I'm going to be using it to cut the facing. So I'm going to place the one of the pieces front or back. The folded ends should match, and then I'll trace out the neckline plus a bit of the shoulder. Next I'm marking 2 inches, which is going to be how wide the facing will be. I mark 2 inches all around like so, and I'm going to be cutting it out. So since we have both front and back necklines the same, we're going to be cutting the same, placing this facing on another piece of fabric to cut out the same shape. So here for the design in front of the gown, I'm going to be marking 4 inches on this yellow fabric all the way down. The fabric is 60 inches long, which is enough for what I need. So I'm marking 4 inches all the way down. I'm connecting it with my ruler and I'll be cutting that out. So next I'll fold into two like so, right sides together, and I will go sew all the way to the end. After which I will turn it to the right side and give it a good press, as you can see here. So next I'm folding it into two to get the middle. I'm just folding it into half and using my iron to crease it. We'll be using that crease to help us sew it to the front of the dress. So after creasing, the front piece already has a crease in the middle, which is what we're going to be following. So we're going to be matching the crease of this yellow piece to the center of the front fabric. I'll be using my pins to hold them in place before I will take this piece to the sewing machine and sew on both sides of the yellow piece. So after sewing it down, this is what we have. I placed it such that a bit of it is hanging on the top and on the lower part, so now I can trim it out following the exact shape of the neckline. I'm also going to trim the excess on the lower part as well. So next up, I will be placing the facing on the main piece, right sides together, I will take it to my sewing machine and sew round the neckline using 1/4 of an inch, like so. And then I will hem once the lower part of the facing. I will do the same thing for the other piece. So after sewing, this is what I have. I am notching round the neckline, making tiny cuts very close to the seam line. Next up, I will turn it to the wrong side and iron it flat. So after ironing, I will use hemming gum to glue the facing to the body of the dress. So I'm going to be repeating the same thing for the back piece. So this is the back piece. I'm going to be placing the right piece on top of it, the front piece rather. So I'm placing front and back, right sides together. The next thing we're going to do is to join the shoulders. So you can just go join the shoulders like so, or open a bit of the facing and turn it to the other side and sew before bringing it back. Since it's hemming gum, once you put your iron on it, it's going to glue back in place. So here I've joined the shoulders. The next thing I have these bias pieces. We're going to use them to pipe the sleeve part of the dress. Is measuring 1.5 inches wide. So from this point here, looking at the curve, I'm going to fold the edge of the bias piece and then place it round this sleeve part all the way to the other end and sew using 1/2 of an inch. We're going to do the same thing for this other end, from this point all the way across the shoulder down to that same point on the other side. So after sewing, this is what we have. We're going to fold it completely to the wrong side. Remember, we placed it on the right side, so this is going into the wrong side. Fold it completely into the wrong side, then fold the raw edges once and top stitch. Fold the entire yellow into the wrong side and then fold the raw edges one more time and then top stitch all the way. So after doing that, this is what we have. This is the wrong side and this is the right side. So I used yellow thread on top and then the black one under, such that we don't have yellow showing on the outside of the dress. So next I'm placing the right sides together, both front and back. I place them right sides together here. This is the wrong side facing up. Next I'm going to be marking from that hip line. Remember we added 2 inches of sewing allowance, so I'm going to be marking the 2 inches on this other end and then connect the curve upwards like so. That is where we are going to be sewing. So I'm going to mark 2 inches on this other side. The first line we marked is still there, so we're going to be using that. On this end I'll mark 2 inches all the way to the bottom of the dress. But before we sew these lines in place, I'm going to hem the lower part of the lower part of the dress first of all before we sew the sides. So here I'm pinning them in place. I love to pin so that things don't move on me. And also remember I said it's going to have a slit on the side and not the back. So I'm marking 14 inches upwards. That is where the slit is going to stop. 14 inches from the down. You can mark anything from 14 to 20 inches. And your slit can be on one side or on both sides. If you're going to add your slit to the back of this dress, you may need to add 1.5 inches allowance to the back before you start marking. So after pinning, I'll go sew. Like I said, I'll hem the lower part first before sewing the sides. So after sewing and hemming the lower part, we're going to turn it to the right size. After which I'm going to notch that curved point. Remember that point we curved in. I'm making notches there on both sides so that that point relax how it should be. So after notching, I will go ahead and iron everything flat before we move on to the next step. So here is it all ironed. This is the right side of the dress facing us and it's folded into two. So from this shoulder point, I'm going to be marking the armhole. I'm working with here, the armhole I'm working with here is 12 inches. So I'm marking 12 inches here. And then the half length I'm working with is 20 inches. I'm marking 20 inches. And then I'm drawing a line. And then the next thing you should mark should be the hip line. Well, I didn't mark that. I'm going to consider that 32 inches point as my hip line. So on this bust, on this armhole line, I'm going to be marking the bust measurement I'm working with divided by 4 plus 1 inch of ease. So on this half length line, I'm going to be marking the half length round divided by 4 plus 1 inch of ease as well. Then I will use my ruler to connect from the armhole to the half length and then take it out to that corner like that, which is going to be the hip measurement you're working with. So right here we already have the hip measurements we are working with divided by 4 plus 1 inch of ease, which is exactly what is there. The person I'm sewing this for is a bit tall, so their measurements are not your average measurements. For an average person, your hip line should be about 24 inches or so. But this person's hip line is about 29 or thereabout. You can see that the half length is 20 inches. So turning to this side, I'm going to do the same thing. I will mark the armhole, which is 12 inches, and then half length, which is 20 inches, like I said earlier. And then here I'm marking the bust divided by 4 plus 1 inch. And then here the half length round divided by 4 plus 1 inch. Using my ruler, I'm going to connect these points like so, and then connect outwards like this. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine now and sew on those two lines, straight down and out. So after sewing, I'm spraying some water to get rid of the chalk, seeing that we marked on the right side. I'm going to spray some chalk to get rid of the chalk. Spray some water to get rid of the chalk. And that is basically it on how to make this trendy butterfly dress. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comment section below. Please give this video a like, it helps the channel out. Also share it with your friends, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.